My name is Jim Davis. I'm the County Extension Director for the University of Florida, and Sumter County and Hernando County. If you don't know where these counties are at, we're in the central portion of the state. Sumter County, been there for 15 plus years. Known for the villages, which is a beautiful area. I had to do a lot of birding up there. And Green Swamp, Dade Battlefield, and Half Moon. A lot of beautiful places. We do guided hikes. I'm going to do 1 or 2 this fall. I'm going to crank it up next spring as well, so look for those. In Hernando, we have beautiful Chinsigat, both the Manor House area and wildlife management area. Please visit Chinsigat. It's an absolutely gorgeous place. Right now, you have got the red-headed woodpeckers out going like crazy and a lot of pollinators. And Weeki Wachee, Peck Sink, a lot of cool places. And I do guided hikes over there as well. And so today we have Dr. Jarrett Daniels. And Jarrett is one of my favorite speakers that we have as part of our WISE series goes. And he's nationally known, if not world renowned, for his work with Lepidopterans. And I'll let him introduce himself. Jarrett will give some information on buying his books. He has some new books out. I highly recommend them. I have several of Jarrett's books. He is a wonderful photographer. He's an excellent writer. As you can tell going on, he's going to be an excellent speaker. So we're very, 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 very happy to have Jarrett on today. So Jarrett, with that, I'm going to let you introduce yourself when we get started.
Thanks, Jim, and really a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. So I'm Jarrett Daniels. I'm a professor in the Department of Entomology and Nematology at the University of Florida, and also curator of the McGuire Center for Lepidoptera and Biodiversity at the Florida Museum of Natural History. And my lab works primarily on at-risk insects, particularly pollinators and butterflies. So essentially, I'm an insect conservation biologist. And today I want to take you through kind of a virtual field trip, if you will, of some of the common butterflies of Florida. And as Jim mentioned, it's a great time of year to get outside and take hikes. There's a tremendous variety and, just a plethora of wildflowers blooming right now, and a lot of fall species of butterflies and other pollinators taking advantage of those late season resources. And temperatures are cooling down, so we don't have to brave the 95 degrees to get out and really have a good time. So I'm just trying to move this forward. So just before I get started, I wanted to give this a little bit of background. So I think all of you know that Florida is a really great state for butterflies overall, but if you look globally, there's about 18,000 species of butterflies, a little over 750 species within the US, and Florida has almost 200 species of butterflies, and that vacillates from year to year because especially north to south, we get kind of the confluence of northern taxa in the Panhandle and a lot of representation from the Caribbean and South Florida, and oftentimes some tropical vagrants coming in. So that number is not necessarily static, but what it does mean is that it's really the best state east of the Mississippi for butterfly watching, butterfly gardening, and really getting out and enjoying the diversity of species north to south we have in the state of Florida. And one of the main reasons for that, of course, is the kind of longitudinal nature of this state. As you progress from the Panhandle down to South Florida, a lot of different systems, a lot of different habitats, tremendous plant diversity and habitat diversity, and that really begets the diversity of insects. So that is kind of the driver for the butterfly diversity and overall insect diversity that we see. So it's really a fantastic state to explore, and I'm constantly, realizing new places that I've never seen before, even within an hour of where I live. So it's a lot of places to go. And of course, butterflies offer a lot from a viewing perspective. They're large, they're showy, they're relatively easy to identify. They go through this 4-part life cycle from adult to egg to larva to pupa, which makes them, very interesting. They're tied to specific plants and plant communities, and they're also very easy to attract to your landscape. So they kind of offer a range of possibilities for watching, whether you're looking for the adult butterflies or you're being a little bit more explorative and looking for the other life stages within the landscapes around you. It's really a fascinating progression and opportunity to enjoy nature. And adult butterflies are, really fascinating. They're great chemists. They navigate the world using their large compound eyes. But in the case of this zebra longwing, she's exploring the various plants in my backyard looking for a place to lay her eggs. And so she uses those large compound eyes to search out leaf shape. But as she gets closer, she will land on the leaf, scratch the leaf surface with her tarsi, which gives her a chemical cue that either this is the right plant and I'll lay an egg, or it's the wrong plant and I need to keep looking. And I would also suggest that all the life stages of butterflies are really wonderful to enjoy, not just the adult butterflies, but which get all the attention. So here we have, individual butterflies that lay eggs singly. On the left-hand side is the red spotted purple on the tip of a wild cherry leaf. The middle kind of turban-shaped leaf is our largest skipper, the giant skipper on a blade of, or a leaf of yucca. And on the far right-hand side is a pearlized kind of round leaf or egg of a spicebush swallowtail, the underside of a sassafras leaf. And then some will lay eggs in smaller clusters. And again, you can see here not only the diversity of color, shape, but also sort of the architecture, if you will, of how they actually deposit those eggs on the plant. And so left to right are great southern white eggs. The kind of coppery colored reddish eggs are pipevine swallowtail. The very uniquely kind of purple and blue eggs are a hammock skipper. And then the ones that are barrel shaped, laid one on top of the other, are the question mark butterfly. And then they also lay eggs in larger clusters. And again, here you can see not only the geometric differences, but also, again, the color differences. So again, left to right are the phaon crescent, kind of green eggs. In the middle is actually a butterfly that doesn't occur in Florida, but I threw it in just because I love the color and the kind of the egg mass. And this is the Baltimore checker spot from the Midwest and Northeast. And the one on the far right is the kind of Mayan pyramid looking shape of the tawny emperor butterfly, which does lay eggs one on top of the other, and actually is the only communal egg-laying species we have in Florida. So if you were to rotate that slide, you would see that it truly is in the shape of a pyramid. And then, as you all know, inside those eggs, the embryo of the larva is developing, and they will soon hatch out to hungry little larvae, which do one thing extremely well, and that's eat and grow and devour plant material. And here are the young larvae of the Polydamas swallowtail on an Aristolochia. And then as they grow, they can expand in size and mass 1,000-fold or more. And so going from a few millimeters once they hatch out to several inches in size, depending on the species. And here we have probably the most common garden butterfly in Eastern North America, one that I'm sure if you have an herb garden, you're most familiar with. And that's the full-grown caterpillar of the black swallowtail butterfly, here feeding on the blossoms of fennel. And then larvae are equally, fascinating. They come in all sorts of different sizes and shapes and colors. And they have many unique ways of avoiding detection, or particularly avoiding being eaten by a predator. And here is the giant swallowtail caterpillar. If you have citrus or citrus family plants in your garden or landscape, you probably run across these. These are very sizable caterpillars, but they mimic the kind of the form and color of a bird dropping or a lizard dropping, and they actually sit on top of the leaf and kind of advertise to other predators that, you probably don't want to eat your own excrement, so you probably will want to avoid me. So it's a really unique disguise. And then some, or almost all swallowtail larvae have these projections, these fleshy glands called osmeteria. The giant swallowtail is on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side is our only endangered butterfly, only endangered swallowtail butterfly in the U.S., Ceraunus swallowtail, that has those pure white osmeteria. But if you've ever poked a swallowtail larva, you know that they kind of rear back and they avert these glands, which smell very foul, and they're very irritating to other insects. They rub them on the antennae in the eyes and the head of other insects, and it's a great chemical defense. And then some larvae, like the pipevine swallowtail, look very much like a different organism. So here, this is one that is aposematically colored. That black and orange coloration warns predators that it's distasteful, but it also mimics a venomous organism, in this case, a centipede. And then some obviously look like they've had a bad hair day. This is a little metalmark butterfly, the only metalmark in Florida, feeding on a thistle leaf. And here you can see the long kind of silvery white hairs. They really do two things. They help blend the caterpillar into its background, but they also help prevent parasitism by flies or wasps, making it difficult for that insect to land on the back or the body of the organism itself. And then some are really alien in appearance. This is the Brazilian skipper that feeds on canna. It's semi-transparent, and so you can actually see the dorsal heart going down the back, the airways from the locations on the side of the body feeding into the body. So it's a great one for kids to really start exploring the internal organs of a caterpillar, and it really does truly look alien in appearance. And then of course they come in, we can continue this conversation all day. They come in a range of different sizes, colors, and patterns. And this is just an example slide showing several different larvae within one family of butterflies, the Lycaenidae, the hairstreaks and blues. And again, here you can see everything from ones that blend seamlessly into the background of the environment to ones that are really gaudy in their appearance and everywhere in between. So paying attention to the larvae is really a fun exercise. And then, some have very ornate spines, like this question mark butterfly that look like they might actually be venomous. They're actually quite harmless to our touch, but they make it very difficult for a predator to swallow this caterpillar. And then some are very cryptic, like this satyr on a blade of St. Augustine grass that blends seamlessly into the environment, and that's exactly what it's hoping for, to avoid detection from a predator. And if you're interested, the head of the insect is actually on the upper left-hand side of the slide and the tail end on the lower right-hand side. And then some, like the queen and the monarch, they are really ornately colored and advertise again that they feed on and sequester toxic chemicals within their tissue that render them quite distasteful to predators and other organisms. And then some are quite comical. So this is one of my favorites and one of my wife's favorites. This is the full-grown caterpillar, the Spicebush Swallowtail. It has a large thorax and these very ornate false eyes that are best seen head-on. And you can imagine if you're a lizard or another organism that's hunting visually and you wander down the stem or the leaf and you encounter this, it looks like something that might attack you right back. So that's exactly what it's going for. And they also change color over their life. The one on the upper side of this slide, the kind of more amber colored one, is getting ready to pupate. So they do actually change over the course of their lives as well. So going from larvae now to kind of common butterflies that you might encounter. And of course, I have to start with the state butterfly of Florida, the zebra longwing, because this is just a fascinating organism in many ways. It's a tropical genus and really a tropical species that just kind of ekes its way into the US in the southernmost extremities, but is common throughout much of Florida and really the deep south, and is an unmistakable butterfly. You will not mistaken this butterfly for any other species that you might encounter. And it has a number of unique traits to it. It's a long-lived butterfly. It lays eggs in large clusters. And here you can see on the left-hand side, a female butterfly sitting head down and ovipositing many eggs on the terminal growth of a native passion vine. And they will lay eggs in dozens or even up to 50 or 60 eggs at one sitting. The larvae hatch and they are communal throughout much of their lives, feeding gregariously together. And so this is a common sight if you have passion vines in your yard. The unmistakable kind of polka dotted white and black spiny larvae of zebra longwings that are really quite unique and easy to spot in the field. And then the pupae are really quite unique as well. They do look like a dead leaf when they hang, but if you look at them kind of head on from the dorsal surface on down, you can see that they have kind of iridescent kind of coloration or drops, kind of mercury-like drops, and then these long kind of phalanges that hang off the head. And this is actually trying to mimic the head of a spider. So it's a good way, again, of looking like potentially a dangerous organism head on that a predator might be searching for and realize, hey, this is something that might actually attack me or could defend itself. And so I might need to be wary of that attack. And then in addition to feeding on flower nectar, which these guys do avidly, they also feed on pollen. And this is common for this entire genus throughout the tropics. They gather pollen grains on their proboscis and then will mass them into a large ball. And then they'll pause for a while on a leaf or a blossom, and they'll secrete digestive enzymes off the tip of their proboscis to dissolve that kind of ball of pollen into kind of a liquid-like soup that they'll sip up through the tip of their proboscis. And this is a very protein-rich meal, which will enable them to get a really nutritious food source that enables them to repair their cells, and it really enables their long life compared to most butterflies, which might only live for a few short weeks. This butterfly can actually live as an adult for several months, 3, 4, 5, or even more months as an adult butterfly. And then they also have a really unique behavior that you can see in your own backyard, and that it's a pupal mating species. So the pupa in this slide is a female, and the 2 adult butterflies are males. They've chemically found this butterfly due to olfaction. And then once they come in contact with it, the males will actually guard the female pupa. And this is a highly competitive process that I can show you in this little video. So these are 2 males. Here's another male coming in, and they're actively guarding this female. The wings are outstretched. They're not making it easy for that 3rd male to land next to the pupa. And this is something very visual that you can see in your own landscape. And what's happening is that the rival male, the male that's successful, will fend off the other males. And then as soon as that female butterfly closes from that pupa, even before her wings are fully expanded and hardened, he will mate with her. So it shows the great competition, the evolutionary competition for mate resources in the environment. But it's one of the few butterflies that actually undertakes this behavior and is really quite fascinating to encounter. But again, something you can see, in the Florida environment quite readily. And then the other thing which makes this really fascinating, and I'm sure many of you have seen this, but if you have this butterfly in your yard, look in the evening to kind of overhanging branches or Spanish moss on trees. And this is a butterfly that communally roost together at night in oftentimes fairly large aggregations by, a few individuals to dozens of individuals. And it's really the only butterfly that does this in Florida. And so if you are in the right spot and the right time to encounter this, it's really an amazing sight to behold and a really unique behavior. And it's kind of unique for a species in Florida to do this. So this really makes our state butterfly of Florida a great one to watch, because there's so many cool behaviors and traits that this butterfly offers from a visual perspective. And then if we move on to super showy species like swallowtails, we'll start with the largest butterfly in Florida, the tiger swallowtail, the eastern tiger swallowtail, which is, again, an unmistakable butterfly. This is an adult female feeding on prunus in the springtime. The beautiful yellow and black coloration makes it quite unique and distinctive. But of course, it is dimorphic. And so female butterflies can be yellow or they can be black. And also some gradation in between, but the black form females mimic the toxic pipevine swallowtail. So even though the males are unmistakable, females can be a little bit more challenging to identify when you encounter, but it's a very sizable butterfly, and it's also a butterfly that when it feeds on blossoms, it tends not to flutter its wings very much. It holds its wings outstretched, which can be a cue or a behavioral cue for its identification, but purely a spectacular butterfly. And then we go from that to a more subtropical species that ekes its way into northern Florida each year, is very common in central and south Florida, and is the only swallowtail in Florida that does not have hind wing tails. And this is the polydamas swallowtail, often also called the gold rim swallowtail. It's a very fast-moving butterfly. It's very adept to adapting to urban environments. It's a common garden butterfly. And again, it's easy to identify not only because of its kind of behavior and its coloration, but the fact that it does not have a hind wing eye spot. It also feeds on Aristolochia and sequesters the toxic chemicals into its tissues, which render the adult butterfly and the larvae very distasteful to predators. It does feed on a number of non-native Aristolochia, so it's one that if you plant non-native species that can be a little bit invasive, you will attract this butterfly, but not the other pipevine swallowtail, Aristolochia feeding swallowtail in Florida. And then one of my favorites, again, an unmistakable species in Florida, is the zebra swallowtail. This is one that is, I would wager to say, is one of the prettiest butterflies in the Deep South. It's really just fantastic to see. It does not adapt well to urban environments. This is one that really needs kind of more expansive habitat. It's more of a dry pineland species, although you will find it in some more moist woodlands as well, but not very much in urban suburban landscapes at all. It feeds on pawpaw as a larva, and it does also have seasonal form. So you might not notice it a great deal, but in this slide, the ones on the lower portion of this slide and on the right-hand side, they have a little bit more white coloration. They have shorter hindwing tails, and these are spring and fall morphs of the butterfly, and the summer ones are a little bit darker in color, and they have much longer hindwing tails. So it is one that changes just a little bit depending on when you see it in the wild, but again, unmistakable and really quite spectacular. And then one that is fairly common and also a fairly common garden butterfly is the pipevine swallowtail, named for the Aristolochia host plants that it feeds on. It's a beautiful butterfly that has very iridescent and boldly patterned colors, particularly on the underside of the wings shown here. The dorsal surface is not quite as showy. Males have kind of a iridescent blue-green hindwings. The females are pretty black and drab, but they again advertise the fact that they're distasteful to predators primarily because of the coloration on the underside of the hindwing, which is quite spectacular. And this really feeds primarily on only native Aristolochias. And then a common butterfly throughout much of the eastern portion of North America is the giant swallowtail. Even though it is named the giant swallowtail, it really battles the eastern tiger swallowtail for being the largest butterfly in Florida. And that's probably a battle that isn't entirely won because there's a lot of variation in size, but it's a chocolatey brown butterfly on the upper surface, has these large spatulate hindwing tails with a kind of a teardrop kind of cream colored spot in the middle, and a beautiful kind of iridescent stained glass pattern to the wings below that you can see in this slide. So it's an unmistakable butterfly generally. It's common in most areas of Florida, urban and suburban and wildlands. It feeds on citrus, so it's one of the few species that you could maybe consider just a very, very minor pest of home landscapes or nurseries, feeding on cultivated citrus as well. But it's a beautiful butterfly to enjoy and invite into your landscape. Has a great caterpillar that we saw earlier. So that purely outweighs any type of pest problems that this butterfly would present to a traditional home gardener. And then probably the most common garden butterfly throughout eastern North America is the black swallowtail. And this is a kind of a pretty unmistakable species. It also mimics the toxic pipevine swallowtail, but has these kind of double bands of yellow, this kind of orange spot near the hindwing tail with a central black pupil and a spotted abdomen. All these characteristics make it fairly easy to identify. However, it is dimorphic, so males and females do look quite different from one another. Females have much less yellow and much more blue, and they mimic the toxic pipevine swallowtail. And of course, the larvae feed on members of the carrot family, both wild and cultivated, making it a fairly common butterfly to encounter, especially if you have an herb garden or a vegetable garden. You will probably see these large kind of green and black and orange spotted caterpillars in your home landscape. And then kind of the last swallowtail here is the Spicebush Swallowtail, a beautiful velvety black butterfly with sort of a kind of a greenish blue hue to the hindwing. Overall, this is a much more forest kind of swamp area butterfly. It's quite beautiful, quite common. It's an avid flower visitor, so you will see this in home landscapes quite readily, in gardens. in kind of suburban landscapes, not so much urban landscapes. It also mimics the toxic pipeline swallowtail. So that theme kind of goes throughout most of the swallowtails in Florida, where they do really mimic another organism. So that makes identification a little bit more challenging, but if you pay attention and you observe closely and particularly document your observations with a photograph, you can really, without much energy, come to the correct identification fairly quickly. And then if we go on from swallowtails, which are arguably the most charismatic and easy to identify and largest butterflies in Florida, to whites and sulfurs. And of course, these are named for the fact that dominantly the color form is yellow, orange, or white. And probably the most common sulfur across the state of Florida is the cloudless sulphur. This is a large kind of lemon yellow butterfly, almost unmarked with a few little exceptions to that rule. And very, very avid flower visitor, just common in pretty much every habitat in Florida, common in gardens. It is a migratory species. So right now it's migrating through the peninsula of Florida from points further north in huge numbers. And if you are driving east-west on any Florida highway, you will see these guys going due south. If you're along the beach and kind of hanging out in the water, you'll see these butterflies migrating along the coast as well. So it's a great time to see this butterfly in Florida. And again, it's primarily kind of a lemon yellow. The males and females are pretty similar to one another. The female is on the right-hand picture of this slide. It has a little bit more dark markings. The male is predominantly unmarked, although on the underside, it does have a little bit of different coloration and a few small marks, but nothing really that sets it apart outside of the overall size and color of this butterfly. So a really common garden butterfly, feeds on sennae as a caterpillar, very, very common partridge pea as well. So it's a really abundant, super abundant butterfly in the deep south. One that you can mistake that species for is this guy. This is predominantly a central and South Florida butterfly, although it does make its way further north into portions of North Florida and the deep south each late summer and early fall, and that is the orange barred sulphur. This is a much larger butterfly than the cloudless sulphur. It's a deeper yellow butterfly that has kind of tinges of kind of pink or orange on it, and the upper surface really gives it away. The males have that distinctive orange bar to the forewing, which is its namesake marking. Females are seasonally variable, anywhere from kind of really beautiful deep yellow to orangey, almost to kind of a pearlized white color, depending on the season. But it's an unmistakable butterfly when you see it flying, very fast flying, very large, and quite eye-catching in the home landscape. And then a butterfly that not necessarily would be considered a common butterfly, but if you live in Central Florida, particularly adjacent to scrub or pineland habitat, I would argue that butterfly is probably fairly easy to encounter. And that is the southern dogface butterfly. And it's called the southern dogface predominantly because it has the kind of the profile shape of a poodle on its forewing. And you can kind of see that in this picture by the light kind of coming through those forewings. You can see the large black eye spot and sort of that large snout of the yellow coloration, which makes it pretty unique for any butterfly in Florida. It's also the only sulphur that has pointed forewings. And right now, it's kind of going through a transition. It is a butterfly that overwinters as an adult butterfly. And here you can see again that kind of dog face in profile view on the upper forewings. But as the fall progresses into winter, the undersides of the butterflies that are emerging will change from kind of that deep yellow to this beautiful rose-colored form called rosea, which is the one that will overwinter in Central Florida. So it's a spectacular butterfly, and one that is common in scrub and pinelands and sandhill habitat. Its larvae feed on a variety of dahlia, including summer farewell, which is a fairly common pineland wildflower, but again, often occurring in fairly large numbers in Central Florida. And then some little sulphurs, which are super common, but often a little bit more challenging to identify. This is the little sulphur. Eurema lisa, which is probably the most common one throughout most of Florida. It's kind of a lemon yellow, butter yellow colored butterfly on the underside. It has that kind of mauve colored spot on the apex of the hindwing. It does have seasonal forms as well as is dimorphic. So males are always yellow, females can be yellow or kind of almost pure white. And then going from summer to winter form, they're almost pure white on the underside to kind of a much more deeper yellow color during the winter months. It overwinters as an adult butterfly, feeds on partridge pea and sensitive pea, is common in a wide variety of areas from roadsides to pineland and scrub habitat and even upland forest as well. And then one of my favorite little butterflies, primarily because I did my dissertation work on it, is the barred sulphur, Eurema daira. And this is a really unique butterfly for many reasons. One is it has really distinct seasonal forms. And so here you can see the white form, which is the summer form or wet season form. And then right behind it, a slightly larger, very different looking butterfly, which is the winter form or dry season form. They really do look like different species. And this is a common open area butterfly. You'll find this along roadsides, along retention basins, waterways, pinelands, feeds on a number of weedy leguminous species. And it's named because it has this black bar along the trailing edge of the forewing, predominantly in males, but a little more diffuse in females, and these very, very distinct seasonal forms, which vary a wide range from where you are in Florida. So up here in Gainesville, you might find individuals in the winter months that are kind of tan colored on the underside. If you go down to Central Florida, where the background leaf litter changes predominantly to a slightly more kind of orangey brown color, you'll have ones that are almost brick red in color. So a lot of variation from location to location, but it makes it really fun to look during different seasons to see the same butterfly and how it really does change over time. And then one that's out in huge numbers right now is the sleepy orange butterfly. This is our largest member of this genus. It's a really beautiful yellow butterfly, but on the upper surface, it's brilliant orange, has, again, very distinct seasonal forms. It feeds on a number of weedy sennaes, which are, in abundance right now, and just really a beautiful butterfly to see. It does kind of have localized migration tendencies, so it can move often in fairly large numbers from one location to another depending on resources. But it's an easy butterfly to observe, easy butterfly to identify, and really common during the late summer and fall. So if you're out looking at wildflowers or taking a fall hike, you will probably encounter this butterfly within the next several months. And then our smallest little sulphur in Florida is the dainty sulphur. And this is a common weedy area butterfly, often super abundant along roadsides because its larvae feed on Biden's alba, probably one of the most widespread and abundant wildflowers. It flies very low to the ground. It also has seasonal forms, and it looks very similar to the barred sulphur. It has that kind of black bar along the trailing edge, but it has this very distinct little black cap to the forewing and this kind of longitudinal or elongated wings, and that and the size of it, which is quite small, and how it flies very low to the ground, will make it quite easy to identify, and one that you can see even at 50, 60 miles an hour going along the roadway along the side, where it can oftentimes reach really super abundant numbers. And then just throwing in one white butterfly throughout Florida, and this is probably the most commonly encountered one throughout peninsular Florida, and this is the great southern white. This is a butterfly known predominantly for being in coastal systems, but it does move inland periodically looking for resources. And it's also one that's well known for having extreme boom and bust years. Boom years when it's often in super abundance and it'll make these sort of mass movements to more inland locations looking for resources. But you can literally drive in South Florida or South Central Florida and see this butterfly, almost huge clouds of it along roadways in really good years. So it can be a super abundant butterfly. It generally is pretty easy to identify because it's almost pure white or kind of chalky white on the underside of males particularly, But if you look at the antennal tips, that's the sheer giveaway. They're aquamarine antennal tips, which are really beautiful and they really shine in the sunlight. It's a great butterfly to photograph for that reason as well. It also is sexually dimorphic. Males and females look a little bit different. Males are almost pure white. Females can be kind of dirty white to almost kind of pure gray in color. But it's a weedy area butterfly, open sunny areas, coastlines, coastal habitats. It is common in coastal gardens, but then also can be found in inland locations, especially in really good years. And if we move on to some of the smaller species, which are arguably, I think, some of the more interesting ones, although easy to overlook because of their size, we'll start with one of the largest hair streaks in Florida. This is the great purple hair streak, and this is probably, I would argue, one of the easiest to identify and maybe one of the more reclusive ones we have in Florida. It tends to hang out in the canopy of oaks and other trees because its larvae feed on mistletoe, but it is an avid flower visitor, and the adults will come down readily to blossoms. So if you live in a highly forested area or adjacent to kind of upland communities that are dominated by oaks, you will often see these guys on abundant floral resources. And the large size plus the kind of the black color of the wings below and the red spots along the thorax and this kind of bright orange abdomen really give it away. And if you're lucky enough to see it in flight, it is just iridescent blue above. It's a spectacular butterfly. Males are extremely iridescent. Females are a little bit more powdery blue. And it has these two really long hindwing tails, which are quite spectacular to see when you see fresh individuals. Excuse me. And it is advertising because of that black and orange coloration, the fact that it does sequester toxic chemicals from the mistletoe, which render the larvae and the adult butterflies distasteful to predators. But again, a really spectacular butterfly, one that you'll tend to see only as singletons, never in huge numbers, but they do hang out on blossoms and are fairly easy to photograph and observe. And then probably one of the more common hair streaks in a wide range of different habitats, even in forested suburban and urban areas, and that is the red banded hair streak, well named because of this very distinct kind of bright orange-red band through the middle of the wing and this kind of brown or kind of russet brown background color of the wings. It's a fairly common butterfly. It's common throughout 12 months of the year in Florida. It also has the distinction for the fact that the larvae do not feed on living plant material, but they're actually detritivores. The females will often lay eggs on the dead leaves below the host plant, which is either a variety of different sumacs or wax myrtle, and the larvae will feed not on the living vegetation, but on the fallen leaves below the host, which make it really unique among Florida butterflies. It's not much to speak of on the wings above, but traditionally you're going to see it with its wings firmly closed, and that orange band really is unmistakable. And then arguably the most common hair streak that most people encounter because it feeds on a wide range of different hosts, is common in a wide range of different systems, including gardens and open areas, and that is the gray hair streak, aptly named because it's gray above and below. On the underside, it's kind of this chalky gray with these kind of intersecting black bands marked with orange, and this beautiful black-capped orange hindwing spot adjacent to the tails. It's kind of deep gray above, chalky gray below, and really quite common in most open sunny landscapes. And then probably the most common open area blue we have in Florida, this is a Ceraunus Blue. This is a little tiny butterfly that flies very low to the ground, common in kind of pinelands, dry systems, vacant fields, fallow agricultural lands, along roadsides, flies very low to the ground, has a variety of different kind of brownish black markings, but a single hindwing eye spot ringed in orange, which really give it away. Above and below, kind of, not super showy. Above, males are kind of powdery blue. Females are mostly brown with a little bit of blue scaling. but pretty unmistakable when you see it flying very low to the ground, which is a behavioral clue for observation. Then the only blue that you might confuse it with periodically is the Cassius blue. And this is one that gets predominantly more common as you go from central Florida southward. It feeds on both native and non-native plumbago, tends to fly much higher in the landscape, more at kind of chest and head level up into the canopy. It has two orange-ringed black and blue hindwing eye spots, much more kind of mottled in appearance or striped in appearance. And when you see the individuals above, males and females are much more lavender and white in color. So it appears much lighter in the landscape when you see them flying. And oftentimes you can see these butterflies in fairly good numbers if you're near a host plant of this butterfly. And it's also one, because it does feed on cultivated plumbago, it gets moved around the landscape quite a bit through the horticultural trade. So it kind of piggybacks on the movement of plants. So it can show up really anywhere in the southeast that would normally grow plumbago, well outside of its traditional historic range. And then if we segue into kind of the largest and most diverse family of butterflies, the brush-footed butterflies. And again, I'm only going to cover a few common species that are really ultra common and are pretty unmistakable. And we start with a butterfly that occurs from kind of north central Florida further south. It's an open area butterfly. You'll find it along wet roadside ditches, retention basins, anywhere near water in general. This is called the white peacock. It's a butterfly that often sits with its wings firmly outstretched. It's predominantly white in color, but it's kind of marked with brown and a little bit of orange, especially on fresh individuals. Has these very distinct kind of singular black eye spots on the forewing and hindwing, a little tiny hindwing tail that you might be able to notice there. It flies very low to the ground, and again is common in open, disturbed areas, often along kind of wetland areas or artificial wetlands like roadside ditches or retention basins. Very easy to photograph, very easy to observe, and you really shouldn't misidentify this butterfly with any other species within the state. And then what I would argue is probably the most common garden butterfly that most people encounter. That is, of course, the Gulf fritillary. This is a butterfly that's ultra common and one that feeds on passion vine as a larva. The adult butterflies are pretty unmistakable. You might say they look a little bit like a monarch, but the elongated wings and iridescent colors, iridescent spots on the underside of the wing, which we'll show shortly, make it pretty easy to identify. Again, feeding on passion vines, it's a common garden butterfly. It also builds up huge numbers as the summer progresses. It also, like the cloudless sulphur, is a migratory species. So it expands northward in springtime to points really into the mid-Atlantic. And then in the fall of the year, all those individuals funnel back into the peninsular Florida. So it again can be found migrating southward right now in often fairly good numbers. So if you're going east-west on Florida highways or along the coastline, you will tend to see this butterfly in fairly good numbers flying. It's an avid flower visitor and pretty unmistakable in its overall appearance, and clearly just a wonderful butterfly to have in your home landscape. The larvae, as you guys know, will devour your passion vine very quickly. It's not a butterfly that sort of evaluates the available resources and makes provisions. It'll just lay eggs over everything, and the larvae will completely devour your passion vines within days. And then probably one of the more common and unmistakable butterflies, unless you're in really South Florida, and that is the common buckeye. This is a butterfly that is traditionally found in more open, dry systems, pinelands, sandhills, roadsides, fallow agricultural land. Its larvae feed on a diversity of plants from false foxglove to toadflax to a variety of other kind of weedy plants that are early successional species. And it's pretty unmistakable. It has these large target-shaped eye spots. It can be a little bit challenging to photograph because it's a very wary butterfly. And often the males are particularly territorial. So as you're trying to sneak up on it and photograph it, it will fly a few feet in front of you, wait till you catch up to it, and then fly a few more feet in front of you. So it can kind of tease you and kind of flaunt the fact that you're not going to get too close to me unless you're really, really cautious. It also has seasonal forms. The traditional summer form is beige or light brown below. Then the winter form, which overwinters as an adult butterfly, has this really kind of reddish brown coloration that you can see on the lower slide of this particular image. And it's a really quite spectacular butterfly. It also is migratory, so it will expand northward each spring and then funnel back into Florida in the fall. So right now is a great time to see this butterfly. And if you're out in kind of pineland sandhill habitat and you run across false foxglove, which is in full bloom right now, check the plant. There'll be oftentimes dozens of larvae on those plants right now. And then a common butterfly, particularly common in spring, is the red admiral. This is an unmistakable Florida butterfly in color and pattern. It has kind of a rich brown coloration, apical white spots, and this kind of reddish orange banding through the forewing and outline of the hindwing. This beautiful pattern on the underside of the wings as well. It feeds on a number of kind of weedy plants, including pellitory, which is kind of a nursery weed or early successional weed. And it also feeds on false nettle as a caterpillar and is a pretty common butterfly if you're particularly near kind of rich woodlands and adjacent habitats. And then this butterfly, which is an particularly abundant, open, disturbed area butterfly. This is the American lady, often called the American painted lady. And no butterfly really looks like this in Florida. It has this agate-shaped pattern to the hindwing, these large showy eye spots, this sort of kind of pinkish red coloration on the underside of the forewing. And on the upper side, it has these beautiful kind of orange coloration and these variety of different eye spots and black and brown markings to it. It feeds on a number of kind of cudweed and other kind of early successional weedy plants, very, very common in open disturbed areas, particularly common in spring and early summer. And then I'll end with the monarch simply because, is right now, we're in the middle of the kind of traditional fall migration period for this butterfly. So right now, all the individual butterflies from Eastern North America are moving southward. Many of them will progress through peninsular Florida. Many of them might fall out of migration in South Florida. Many of them will go on to points further south in the Dominican Republic and Cuba. And a great many of them will follow the coastline of the Gulf Coast along and overwinter in the mountains of Mexico. It's just a spectacular butterfly with a lot of great kind of backstory to it because of the fall migration. You probably have larvae in your yard right now if you grow milkweed. And a butterfly that is, despite its commonality and kind of ubiquitous nature, has declined precipitously over the last 30 years. The Western population is less than 1% of its historic numbers, and it's essentially functionally extinct. The Eastern population has dwindled by more than 80%. So it's a good example of what was historically a super common butterfly that is now of conservation concern, even though it occurs quite readily in most habitats. And it's not going to disappear overnight as a species, but the worry is the continued decline of numbers and loss of habitat will continuously erode the overall mass migration to the point where at some point this butterfly may not kind of overwinter in the numbers that it traditionally has in the past. And if you haven't been to Mexico to see the overwintering colonies, I urge all of you to make that trip while you still can to see this butterfly, because it's like packing all the butterflies from Eastern North America into a few square miles, literally like walking into a monarch snow globe. At good times, over 1 billion monarchs in these areas, and in recent years, much lower numbers, but still highly impressive. And it also exemplifies the fact that this is a butterfly that we all can help conserve by the choices we make in our home landscape, by planting native milkweed, by avoiding chemicals, and by encouraging the expansion of monarch breeding habitat throughout the Southeast as well, and being good stewards of our own landscapes as much as we possibly can, and getting out there and paying attention to the butterflies around us and really taking in the multitude of really amazing species we have within the state of Florida, really the best state to go out and observe butterflies. So with that, I'll generally kind of wind this down and end. A little bit of shameless self-promotion in the fact that, as Jim mentioned earlier, I do have many books available. The book on the far left-hand side, Native Plant Gardening for Bees, Butterflies, and Birds, is available right now for the Southeast. The other three that you see are either available or will soon be available. And then if you're looking for a good Florida guide to butterflies, Butterflies of Florida, Field Guide is one that a lot of people do like. Again, field guides are very personal. I expect you would go out and explore the guides that you might find most useful to you. But if you're looking to increase the diversity and the utility of your landscape for attracting pollinating insects, including butterflies, check out some of these resources, and hopefully they're useful to you. And with that, I'll say thank you so much. If you're interested in some of the work that my lab does, you can visit the Florida Museum's website here. You can follow my lab on Twitter, and you can also contact me at my email on the bottom left-hand portion of this slide, jdaniels@flmnh.ufl.edu, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you so much.